Folks, this housing crash is happening right now in the spring of 2022, and it is happening really, really fast, way faster than anyone expected. And right now, there's certain cities, there's certain neighborhoods and counties in America where home values could have already gone down by 15 to 20% based on the data that I'm about to show you in this video. Now, before showing you this data, I want to prep you for what you're about to see. We're going to compare listings on the market in the US housing market right now compared to what Zillow said the true value of these homes was. A lot of you might be familiar with Zillow's estimate of home values, sometimes called the Zestimate. This is derived from looking at sales comps and listing comps in an area and allows Zillow to put an approximate valuation on almost every home in America. What we're seeing right now is that when a seller comes to market in late May, they are now listing their house for a much lower value than the Zillow estimate indicates. And in many cases, this is extreme. For instance, take a look at the Bay Area. We can see here in East Bay, Alameda County, which includes Oakland, of the 727 listings on the market this weekend, they average about a 16% decline in the list price from what Zillow said the value was. And we can see, zooming in further to a zip code level, there's certain zip codes and neighborhoods that are down by as much as 30%. And to really understand what's going on here, take a look at this listing that's currently on Zillow, a 2-bed, 2-bath in Oakland. It's currently on the market for $979,000. That's a massive 35% below what Zillow still says the value estimate is of $1.4 million. You can see that basically this uptick in values that occurred during the pandemic has now been completely erased for this home, and its current list price of $979,000 is barely above what it sold for in 2018. And basically there's a reset going on in the US housing market right now, where a lot of the appreciation that occurred during the pandemic, particularly the last 6 to 12 months, well, it's almost as if sellers coming to market right now are acting as if that appreciation never happened, and they're listing their homes for what the value was 6, 12, maybe 18 months ago. And in one second, I'm going to show you the cities where this is happening most, because it's not just the Bay Area. This is places like Denver and Dallas and many other areas around America. But first, you got to understand why this is happening. Why in just 2 to 3 weeks have we seen such an about face in the US housing market? And it really has to do with the tremendous drop in home buyer demand that's occurred over the last 2 months in America. Due to higher mortgage rates, due to inflation, due to the stock market crash, home buyers no longer have the money to be able to afford buying houses in today's market. And that's why we've seen mortgage purchase applications decline by a massive 35% from its pandemic peak. And now basically the home buyer demand in America in May 2022 is at basically its lowest level in the last 5 years. Coinciding with this collapse in home buyer demand are more and more storm clouds on the horizon for the US economy. 80% of Americans now think a recession is going to occur by the end of 2022. And we're just seeing every single week more and more publicly traded companies getting crushed in the stock market, reporting big losses in earnings. The writing seems to be on the wall for a recession by the end of this year. So when you combine that with the drop in home buyer demand, that's causing a lot of sellers who are listing their homes on the market to feel a sense of desperation and urgency. No longer are they chasing the sky-high values and sky-high sales prices that occurred just 3 to 4 months ago. They are now setting more realistic expectations of what they expect to get for their property. For instance, take a look at this 3-bed, 3-bath listing in Denver, which has now been on the market for 10 days. Its current list price of $899,000 is a massive 23% below what the Zillow value estimate was from last month. Not only that, the current list price is actually below what the value estimate was in late 2018. And it's almost as if some of these sellers are coming into the market to sell their homes, like on this listing in Denver, and they're saying, you know what, I don't really believe that the appreciation during the pandemic is real. I don't believe that the 24% home price growth in Denver, according to Zillow, or the 22% home price growth according to the Case-Shiller Home Price Index is a legitimate figure, and thus I'm going to list my house for a figure I can sell it for, which I think is 5, 10, 15, even 20% below what the same listings were going for just a couple months ago. And what's crazy about this sudden flash crash in the housing market is that this is just the beginning. We're only a couple weeks into the mainstream narrative on the housing market flipping into the negative direction, and you got to understand that as the economic storm clouds I talked about earlier become worse and America hits hits a recession, that's going to further deteriorate demand in the housing market. All of a sudden, the layoffs are going to get a lot more widespread. People who own homes are going to get laid off and are going to be forced to sell. People who are looking to buy a home are going to get laid off and can no longer buy a home. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be bad, and that's going to cause the market to go down even further throughout the year. But the timing is not going to be equivalent everywhere, folks. We can see that right now, the biggest drop in values is occurring in places like Alameda County in San Francisco, Santa Clara County in San Jose. We see San Francisco, Seattle, Boulder, Seattle, LA, Portland, San Francisco, LA, Denver, Washington, D.C., Denver, San Diego, Denver, Dallas, Ogden, Dallas. You can see that the markets with the biggest declines in values already are primarily in expensive, tech-driven housing markets. That's the trend we're seeing right now in real time, that markets on the higher end of the price point spectrum, where buyers were already kind of priced out, well, now they're really priced out because of higher mortgage rates and demand is just falling off a cliff. You can see that exemplified very clearly on this scatter plot where we're comparing the median list price of these counties this weekend in America compared to the percentage decline in list price from the Zestimate. The higher the list price is, the higher the decline in values. But interestingly, if you go to an area like Baltimore, where the median list price is only $250,000, you can see that's actually above what the Zillow estimate is. Or in a place like Allegheny County in Pittsburgh, where the median list price is $270,000, that's actually 4% above the Zestimate. So what we're seeing is that affordable areas in America are still appreciating. In affordable pockets, there's still a lot of home buyers rushing in to buy, and as a result, the sellers who are listing in those affordable places like Baltimore and Pittsburgh are still listing at a high price because they know the demand is there. So this housing crash is something that's going to basically spread from west to east. We're seeing it most severe in California right now. We're seeing it in Washington and Oregon and Idaho. We're seeing it in Utah and Colorado. These are the areas where, according to the National Association of Realtors, home buyer traffic has declined the most and where home sales have declined the most. And what's actually really crazy about these markets is that inventory is still at a record low. Like, we've seen an increase in listings in many of these markets, but for instance, if you go to Seattle, inventory is about 60% below where it was 3 years ago prior to the pandemic. But even with that record low inventory, it's not stopping sellers from cutting their list price. And that's ultimately what's kind of scary about what's happening right now, is that inventory is still really low. And you have to ask yourself the question, what happens over the next 3 to 6 months as inventory increases and continues to increase on the market? Because if reduced list prices are already coming with record low inventory, you can bet by the fall, when inventory is getting closer to what it was before the pandemic, that the cuts are going to be huge. And unfortunately for the housing market, that timing is likely to coincide with the recession that I've talked about already in this video, which is going to further dampen demand, but it's also going to coincide in the summer and fall with another thing that people have forgotten about, and that's the foreclosure backlog in America. That's right, everyone. People forgot all about the foreclosures. Well, according to data from Black Knight Mortgage, there's 640,000 mortgage loans that are more than 90 days past due in serious delinquency, but not in foreclosure. Those 640,000 delinquent loans are going to be foreclosed on very, very soon, now that the foreclosure moratoriums are over. And in fact, you can already see these foreclosures building up on Zillow. For instance, if we take a look at LA County on Zillow, we can see there's 7,400 homes on the market. Now, if I go to the for sale button, get rid of everything except foreclosed and pre-foreclosures, you can see that we have a lot of pre-foreclosures sitting there waiting to hit the market. You can see the list if you scroll down and look at every single one with a pre-foreclosure filing. These pre-foreclosures are going to hit the housing market later this year, just as inventory continues to surge and job losses mount, which is going to further push home prices down. I'm going to cover my outlook on the U.S. housing market more later this week, specifically the cities that have the biggest foreclosure backlogs. So if you're interested in that content, make sure you're a subscriber to this channel so you don't miss those videos when they come out. Turn on your bell for subscribe notifications. And before signing off, I would like to leave you all with a closing statement with my own personal thoughts about how I feel about the U.S. housing market right now, as someone who for a year has been predicting the housing bubble collapse, has been predicting the housing crash. Now that's actually happening, I do not feel like I thought I would feel. I thought I would feel a sense of relief when it finally happened, like, oh, I called this, I predicted this, but I do not feel good about what I'm seeing in the housing market right now, because when you see home prices and home values go down by 20% in 1 month, that's something that should not happen in the US real estate market. That's something that happens in the stock market historically, not the housing market. And unfortunately, we're in unprecedented times now in 2022, where the US housing market now is a speculative investment. It's a casino game for investors. It's a casino game for home flippers and even primary users who ended up buying homes to live in. They got fooled. They got duped by a false narrative surrounding inflation and a housing shortage that fooled so many people into thinking that the increase in home prices was legitimate. Well, it's not, folks. The US housing market is in a new era of volatility where you can buy a house, it can appreciate by 30% in 9 months and then go down in value by 15 to 20% in 2 months. That's unfortunately the way things are right now, and I hope in the future they get better. The answer really lies with the Federal Reserve. If they commit themselves to increasing interest rates not only in the short term but over the long run, that will help put stability back in the US housing market. If they continue playing a game of jockeying interest rates back and forth, jockeying money printing back and forth, we're just going to continue to see wild swings in the housing market. Don't be surprised if there's actually a rally at some point in the next 6 to 12 months in the housing market, just like you would see in the stock market, only to then have the housing market crash further. That's unfortunately the way things are, and I don't feel good about it, but I will be here to give you guys the data 3 times a week on this channel, give you all the updates you need in real time so you can understand what's going on in your backyard and make a better decision with your home purchase or real estate investment.